The acolyte half thought that when he looked again, it would be different. But when Aret dared to open his eyes, he saw the very same hell. The priests were slumped, poisoned chalices of gilded silver slipping from limp hands. The abbot's corpse knelt at the center, still upright, his hands having fallen to the base of the altar. He looked almost peaceful, the royal purple of his robe spotless and ironed. Were it not for the foam bubbling from the abbot's mouth, Aret might have pretended that they were only in prayer. Aret squirmed as the Aquila glowered at him from behind the altar. About him, dozens of his fellow acolytes lay prone and still, littering the small church with their bodies. Only Aret had been too afraid to drink. He could hear the enemy clearly now, the screaming of damned souls, the boom of infernal weaponry, the unholy chants delivered in meticulous high Gothic. For the first time in his life, Aret cursed his ministorum education. He understood every word, those blasphemies that had torn the sky apart and dragged the nightmares forth. The abbot had told them that the enemy would never reach them here, that the god emperor would deliver them, that the imperium was unassailable, that his armies could not be defeated in battle. Even when the city was overrun by demons and howling fanatics, even when the abbot had contradicted himself and ordered self-inflicted death, they had trusted his judgment. They had gone willingly into the emperor's light, murmuring prayers that they would be forgiven for the destruction of his flesh. Aret had accepted the chalice, a simple brass cup unadorned, after he had seen the abbot pour somnum into the amasec. He had intended to drink it. He had brought the cup to his lips like everyone else. But something in him had protested. His lips had closed, his throat had choked, and he had scrubbed away at his lips with a primal terror when he had realized he did not want to die.
"Forgive me,"
he said, forcing his eyes away from the corpses and to the Aquila above. He could feel the stare of stained glass saints staring down at him, and trembled with terror. Aret could not recall being so afraid. His cheeks were wet with tears, urine soaked his undergarments.
"I do not want to die,"
he begged.
"Please, forgive me. I do not want to die."
He screamed as the door to the church burst open, falling prostrate among the dead. Aret scrunched his eyes closed as he heard the stomp and hiss of power armor, muttering garbled prayers beneath his lips. Aret did not suppose he would be saved, but he was afraid. Terribly, paralyzingly afraid. He did not want to die. The heavy footfalls approached the altar, shaking the foundations of the church. Aret heard a crash, and then a silence that banished his mumblings into a terrified quiet. He waited. Minutes passed.
"Forgive me, acolyte."
The voice that spoke the ancient High Gothic seemed deep and calm, almost musical.
"I did not mean to interrupt."
Aret opened his eyes, stifling a sob. There, a giant in crimson power armor knelt on one knee before the altar. A bolt gun the size of Aret's torso rested on the altar itself, its matte black finish chipped with flecks of exposed metal. Beside it was the giant's helmet, pockmarked with a rhythmic pattern of black studs.
"I am Brother Diocles,"
the Astartes said. He angled his face towards Aret, revealing his sun-kissed tan-brown skin, the mournful beauty of his weary dark eyes. Aret could not help but stare.
"You are afraid,"
Diocles observed, glancing towards the altar. Aret realized that the giant's hands were locked into a pious Aquila.
"Do not be afraid."
I...
Aret stuttered. The Astartes turned back with a wry, forgiving smile. Aret blinked in surprise.
"The Blood Angels,"
he managed.
You have..."
"No!"
Diocles replied sharply. His expression darkened.
"Impious mutant-worshipping filth. No, not them.
I
am Brother Diocles of the Word-Bearers Legion,"
the Astartes said. He sighed deeply, readjusting to face Aret directly. His armor hissed and clanked as he turned, snarling like a mechanical beast.
I still think myself as a legionary, though my brothers insist that I belong to the Crimson Herald's warband.
Aret swallowed. He did not know much of those scattered dark secrets of the Imperium, but he knew the word-bearers, what they were. Traitor Astartes.
You are confused,
Diocles suggested. He stared deep into Aret's eyes.
You are still afraid. You think I am a monster, a traitor. But what would you say if I told you that we are alike in faith?
The brazenness of the blasphemy emboldened Aret to speak.
That is not true,
he said, his voice sounding frail in comparison with the Astartes. The traitor smiled thinly.
To think what the Emperor would say if he saw this place.
His eyes passed over stained glass saints, somber statues, purple curtains lined with gold. When he finished, his eyes closed as if to savor what he had seen.
I have visited many churches, many grander than this, many more richly decorated, but there is something about this temple that pleases me. It is like I have visited this place before, in a childhood lost or in a dream, distant.
He smiled, his eyes still closed.
I have heard the rising choir echoing off these circular walls. I have felt my spirit lift, and I have drunk of that music like I might drink golden honey, warm against my lips.
Aret stared. He didn't know what to say.
Ave Imperator Sancte.
The Astartes finished. His eyes flickered open. His hands were still clutched in the sign of the Aquila.
You are mocking me,
Aret said, his voice barely a whisper. Diocles frowned.
No, I do not mock you. And I do not come here to defile this place or sacrifice you before the dark gods, though I understand why you doubt me. Many of my brothers would hurt you. They would arrange the bodies of these priests into shapes pleasing to their demonic patrons. They would desecrate these sacred symbols with ecclesiastical blood. The walls would echo to the sound of screams and evil prayer.
The giant leaned forwards. Aret wanted to pull back, but instinctively he was drawn forwards.
But I am here,
the giant pledged.
And that will not happen. I give you my word, Acolyte.
Aret had to force the rasping words from his parched throat.
The word of a traitor,
he accused. The Astartes sighed.
It is true,
he conceded.
I have committed many sins, some worse than others.
He mouthed a prayer, his eyes shining bright.
But I have returned to his light.
His eyes dimmed when he studied Aret's expression.
You wonder why I still fight alongside them. In truth, I often wonder myself. But then I see a place such as this and claim it for myself. Then I realize that I walk the Emperor's path.
You are insane,
Aret marveled. The Astartes raised an eyebrow.
If I was not here, would it have saved this world? And did it even deserve to be saved? My brothers sent many agents to this world months before our final assault. They spoke to your population. Your countrymen are weak. They abandon their faith easily, as if they cast off a worn-out shoe. Now they are slaves. My brothers' gods do not gladly risk apostasy. Only the strongest mind can resist the madness of their touch, and that madness enslaves them utterly. But I am proven. I have heard the whisper of dark gods in my ear, and I have resisted their inane insanities. I have whiled away my time at pleasure houses, slaughtered alongside berserkers, studied diabolical and paradoxical lore. I have experienced the generosity of the Plague Father and the aloof majesty of the Prince, and I tell you that I felt nothing. Just a pale imitation of something they can never match. I speak of faith, Acolyte. The kind of faith that you can feel in your soul, golden and warm, like honey. The so-called gods of chaos, I tell you that they are merely parodies, Acolyte. Rage instead of fervor, pleasure instead of joy, conspiracy instead of profundity, endlessness instead of constancy. Parodies, nothing more. Desperate clutches, tired cliches, and in our folly we seize at these pretenses. The low-hanging fruit, for the dark gods are abject in their desperate thirsting. So hungrily they reach for our souls, so animalistic, so craven.
He stopped to take a deep breath, his chest rising and falling. His face shone, the echo of his words softening to a cadenced hush.
Our Emperor does not beg, not like they do.
Aret stared open-mouthed. No doubt this was some trick, some blasphemous riddle to distract and corrupt him. But the Acolyte could not fathom the deceit. He did nothing when the Astartes reached forward and placed a gigantic hand upon his shoulder.
The gods of chaos never tempted me,
Diocles said. His eyes were bright with tears.
In truth, I have failed only once, though I will concede that the failure was long-lived. Acolyte, you must not judge me too harshly. You do not understand. I was there, Acolyte. I was there when he told Lorgar that he was not a god. Can you imagine it? I saw him. I saw that he was divine as plainly as I see you now. There was no denying it. The very air shone with golden light. His words were undeniable, majestic. He...
Diocles bowed his head. Aret was frozen, the Astartes still gripping his shoulder. After 3 seconds, Diocles spoke again.
He was a god. And yet he told us he was not. And it was as if we had been told that a table was not a table, or that the color red did not exist. It was so contrary to what we knew, so contrary to our fundamental perception of the galaxy. I cannot blame Lorgar, Acolyte, for the madness that followed. There was nothing but madness. There was nothing else. Lorgar saw that his legion was in crisis. He saw that we could not exist in this state where self-evident truths had been named lies and obvious falsehoods made into dictates. We were unmoored, our eyes put out with red irons, our ears blotted with black wax. We could not continue in that state. None of us could. So we reached for the low-hanging fruit. Maddened, we reached for madness. And so Lorgar fell, and we fell too. For we were his sons and felt his pain as our own.
He smiled at Aret's expression.
I see you do not believe me, Acolyte,
he acknowledged.
And that is fine. Believe only this, then. The Emperor is a god. It took me too long, but now I realize gods can err. They can be wrong, even about themselves.
Diocles' smile deepened. He released Aret's shoulder. Aret let out a breath that he realized he had been holding for minutes. When the Astartes had spoken, it was as if the sound of the war had been swallowed up, the screaming fading to white noise, the slam of bolt rounds just a distant percussion to an orchestral truth. Now in the silence those sounds returned, braying and booming and breaking like rancid waves against the walls. Aret shuddered when he thought of what waited for him outside.
Are you going to kill me?
He asked. Despite it all, he still wanted to live. The Astarte smiled kindly.
What is your name, Acolyte?
Aret.
Why are you alive and yet surrounded by the dead?
Aret hung his head. Though he didn't know why, he felt shame before this fallen Astartes.
I was too afraid to join them.
And why did they choose to die?
They did not want to hear the heresies. The abbot said it was best we died in ignorance.
Diocles considered Aret's words for a few moments.
Well,
he said finally, with a small smile.
It is too late for that now.
I should probably try to kill you,
Aret said, his voice small.
To martyr myself against you. Would that be right?
The traitor's smile grew kinder still.
Yes, Aret. That would be right.
Aret swallowed. There was a knife at his belt, more fit for cheese than flesh, but if he drove it into the Astartes' unguarded eye, then maybe he would stand a chance. He willed his hands to move, to take the knife and seize his martyrdom, but his limbs were frozen, paralyzed in fear. Desperate tears fell from his face. He gasped as the Astartes drew him into an embrace.
Hush now. I have failed too, and they say I was an angel once.
Aret wept into the traitor's armor, his tears running down the crimson breastplate to the stone floor beneath. Though Diocles' power armor was hard and cold, Aret felt strangely comforted. His shame felt distant, meditated away by the slow, steady beats of the Astartes' twin hearts.
I have claimed this place, but I cannot guard it forever,
Diocles said, ending the embrace.
Come with me, Aret. Help me gather up the vestments and the iconography, and we shall take it to the ship. There are others there, men and women like yourself. We shall keep a candle in the darkness of that vessel together. And I will be close. In time, when you have mustered your courage, you shall have your martyrdom against me. You need not fear my brothers. They think I take amusement from parodying our faith. They will not touch you.
Though amazed at himself, Aret was tempted.
What about the church?
I have prevented its desecration, but I cannot save it. I will burn it to the ground and beg the Emperor for his forgiveness.
All right, I'll come with you.
Diocles' smile was like the light of the sun.
Ave Imperator,
he said. Despite himself, Aret found himself smiling too.
Ave Imperator, Sancte.